Greetings, Neowin viewers. Today we're joined by Alan Wake's composer, Petri Alanko, and Remedy Entertainment's Director of Communications, Thomas Puha. We're here today to learn more about Alan Wake's musical ties, more about or details about the company's partnership with Voice of the Fall, Alan Wake's unique musical transitions, and its struggles with licensing. Thank you so much for both of you for being here today. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
Of course.
I'm just going to jump right into the questions. Feel whoever wants to answer it, but I imagine most of the time.
Get right to the point. That's very
Exactly.
very that's how we do it in Finland.
That's good to know. It's a good way to go about things. So I imagine I'll mostly be talking to Mr. Alanko about the music, but feel free to jump in if I miss something or if you want to add something.
It's not lost on me. He is the talent here.
I'll just go right ahead. So what are some of sort of like the musical inspirations behind Alan Wake? Where did you sort of come up with how to sort of score the game?
Oh, well, I think it somehow formed during the making. I was brought on board as early as 2005. And during the very early scenes, there were some discussion about what it would sound like. And one of the references thrown around was Unusual Suspects, the movie, and a lot of film noir things, random names that escape my mind right now. And one thing that was quite sure, and they were rather adamant about it, was that I wouldn't be able to use brass section or woodwinds. Woodwinds would be fantasy-ish, and brass would bring in some kind of slightly too stern and maybe too powerful effect. So we settled with a string section, and I've always liked piano being played really delicately. Piano pianissimo is my favorite dynamic setting, and all that combined with rather vast acoustics, reverb wash, so to speak, in other words. And from there, the first demos were constructed, and I guess it went rather well because I managed to continue with that style throughout the whole development cycle.
That makes complete sense. So what's your sort of process, like it's a journal process of choosing the right music for the right moment? Are there like certain tips and tricks you have learned over the years?
Yeah, actually there are tricks. I like to imagine what happens before, what happens after, and sometimes what happens, say, years after this certain scene, especially if it's somehow profounding or maybe even borderline traumatic or something. I like to know what goes through the mind of the protagonist or antagonist, depending on the scene, and try to build on top of that. And it provides me so much material that one could basically compose 1 hour worth of music out of 30-second video clip, to be honest.
Well, that's a good problem to have. What was your biggest challenge, or what was the most challenging moment for you when you were composing the music for Alan Wake?
Oh, the most challenging moment was Kill Your Darlings moments. I had to cut off so many good themes. Not because of they wouldn't fit in, but of course the plot and the screenplay was being iterated throughout the game and the development. So inevitably there were some changes that affected the soundtrack as well. But let's say that what remains there is actually the better side of it all. So having said that, I don't think you've lost anything. I learned really quite a lot during the making, to be honest. It was the first larger scale project I had, and I was able to utilize my daily pop mindset with some of the tracks I've written, and building on top of that, throwing in some orchestral flavors and whatnot. It was, after all, it was probably the coolest 5 years I've ever had.
So talking a little bit more about the music, can you talk a little bit about the partnership with Poets of the Fall, or I guess in the game they're called the sort of like the old gods of Asgard? Maybe like how that name originated, how the partnership originated, whose idea was it to begin with, and I guess some of the challenges you've had over the years. But I guess we can talk about those later.
Yeah, actually, well, Sam Lake, I mean, the let's say face of Max Payne and main writer and the incredibly gifted human being, is a friend of Marko Saaresta, who happens to be Poets of the Falls lead singer and like from childhood. And they have been working together with Max Payne, and they had several songs in the making, and all of a sudden the first hit appeared with Max Payne, and they actually had another one thrown in there, but as it often happens, they sort of iterated the game again, and the other thing was left out, but it sort of had lit a few candles that maybe we could use this elsewhere. And from there, it sort of started happening. It was a, how would I say, how they appeared in the final game as their sort of, how would I say, in-game pseudonym, or from Poets of the Fall to Old Gods of Asgard. They sort of let themselves go, like rock out with your something out feeling. And we had always wanted to have a proper end credit song, which they managed to to provide, and it sort of clicked pretty early with the track they were writing, and there was a lot of material we threw around. So I would say, since you're in Finland and you happen to be a musician and you know several guys who are in entertainment business or gaming business in our case, you're prone to know each other sooner or later. I would say it's one big family after all, in a way or another.
Though that definitely has its advantages. Just going forward a little bit, so obviously, you know, there have been many interviews over the past about Alan Wake's music, in other games like Max Payne 2. And we know that, for example, like the song War wasn't originally written for Alan Wake and was brought into the game later. But like Children of the Elder God were, songs like that. So how much creative freedom did Boys of the Fall have? Were they just allowed to do whatever they want, or were there like some input? Because I know in the past, like some songs have been made off like poems written by Sam Lake, the creative director. So how did that come about? I mean, exactly what was sort of like the collaboration process?
Usually, Remedy is known to give rather free hands to creators, and they only require the best you can give. And I know as a fact that they indeed wanted them to imagine a certain scene with certain people in it, and that's it. And then a few iteration rounds, and I guess that's pretty much about it. With some scenes, it's of course, how would I say, it's time dependent, or how much a certain scene takes time. It may be pre-rendered, it may be game engine, so-called half cinematic, and so forth. But in essence, most of the output is built on what is being brought forward in the game. In Sam's case, he happens to write really, how would I say, colorfully, and it's very easy to catch ideas from his output. And usually he gets really excited when the other party gets, hey, I have this idea, and Sam immediately starts building on that, and they sort of feed each other. This has happened with me, so I want to imagine that would have been what would have happened with Marko and the Poets. I mean, old gods. But I would like to say that with all that freedom, there's a great responsibility, and I think poets really did feel their responsibility with those tracks they provided for Alan Wake.
So now going on to some of the more sort of like challenge, difficult other things you've faced over the years. But as we all know, Alan Wake was pulled from stores a couple of years ago, and then it eventually came back. Can you talk about exactly what happened and give some more clarity into the situation? Because it seems like there's some details out there, but we haven't really gotten a proper explanation, I feel, over the years.
Yes.
Probably that. You want to take this one, or you can add? I think. Well, we could spend several hours talking about music licensing in general, and how complicated that is in terms of who owns the rights, who owns the publishing rights. Is it the people who wrote the songs or some other? And if there's, let's say, 4 people who wrote the songs, who has what amount of shares technically about the song and decision-making power. So it's complicated. In Alan Wake's case, I remember we discussed this Petri a while ago. That game came out in 2010 originally. So when the licensed songs got in there, it's like, well, how long do you need the license for? And there's like, yeah, 7 years. And people are like, what? Like, why do you need it for so long? And some people were even questioning that because it might seem so easy now. Like, why didn't you just get a perpetual license that you can, you always have the rights? And it's like, well, it's always a case of, as money, cost, and then 2010, did anybody really think like that digital is going to be, that the game has such a long shelf life and these sorts of things? It all seems so obvious now, but wasn't very obvious at that point. And I can imagine there was like, oh, if we can get this song, we need to spend this amount of budget, which means we probably have to spend less on the other songs. So it's a huge balancing act, and it's not like the only game that has had this issue where like some songs just have to be removed because for whatever reason. But am I, Petri, leaving anything out?
Well, actually, no, you're not. The funny thing was the original soundtrack, I mean the orchestral soundtrack written by yours truly, and the licensed song soundtrack, they sort of disappeared at the same time. But for this appeared appeared to me later. I thought they were related to each other, but it turned out that the orchestral soundtrack and its original recording company had ceased to exist. And because they had ceased to exist, so everything published by them was taken out of all streaming services. And at the same time happened the licensing expiration. So these two combined and happening within the same month, or maybe it was even the same 2 weeks. It was like
it was something like that. Yeah, it was very close to each other.
But luckily, we had magnificent help, because I remember sending some email to Microsoft Boyd Post, who was an audio director, if I remember correctly, and told him, hey, there might be some trouble going on. And he was like, oh, I know. I'm aware. I'm already working on it. So, hey, whoa. But there is actually, concerning the licensing, some artists, they tend to want, how would I say? They tend to have their mental image of their own song, and they see it written in a certain way for a certain moment. And when you connect that moment with something coming from, let's say, Microsoft or Sony or Remedy or whatnot, there is a, how would I say, the guy who needs to be in the middle, he really needs to have some emotional intelligence in order to provide all the necessary information for the artist, who is basically on the verge of saying no or saying yes. So it really needs some effort to turn a probable no into yes. And it was a funny thing, because with licensing music, that's what happened with Sam Lake. and several people we wanted to have in the game. He wrote a letter to those artists explaining the vision and how, in what way we are going to use the song. And lo and behold, those who were about to say no or were, I don't know, they said, wait, hell yeah, we want to be in. So it's all about little mysteries and wonders and crossing those. Interesting stuff.
So there were essentially a lot of parties involved that had to be appeased. And I imagine that took roughly like many months.
Yeah, well, yes, it's you're just starting the licensing thing is one thing, and there might be you very seldom are connected to the main artist himself or herself or themselves, and there's usually a publishing company of theirs, record company, agents, managers, whatnot. So you may have to run through 4 or 5 concrete walls before you reach the right person, or before you can even deliver the message.
That makes sense. So just going back a little bit more, just for our listeners. So what exactly did I guess Sam or you or Microsoft have to do to get people on board again? Or did you kind of have to have like one-on-one meetings, renegotiate sort of like, contracts again? How did that work?
Well, the licensing negotiations were done. I mean, re-licensing negotiations were done by Microsoft, and we luckily didn't have to get involved with that. And I'm really grateful, because I've been doing that in my private life. I mean, let's say in my previous life years ago, and it's not an easy job. But yeah, let's just say that luckily we had Microsoft backing us up with that thing.
That's great to know. I mean, now that I guess finally provides more insight and some sort of closure, because I can't tell you how many people have asked us this question, like what exactly happened?
Well, there is the point that maybe at some point it would have happened that, well, we always care about how people play our games and how people perceive them and how they relate them, what kind of emotional attack does the game have to them. So if we would have been forced to lift out, let's say, 10, 15 tracks from there, it would have probably damaged the emotional impact forever. And that would have mean that maybe the future generations wouldn't be able to experience the game the same way that we were, we were prepared. It was a damn near catastrophe, but luckily it was avoided. But licensing is a heavy it's a heavy industry. Let's put it that way.
I can imagine. It definitely sounds stressful and very heavy. So essentially, sort of your viewpoint about this is just like preserving sort of the experience for future future players. That makes complete sense, and that's an admirable sort of purpose to pursue. Going forward.
I think it would have been really strange. Let's say like half the license songs would have been gone. It's just not the same game. It's not the same experience. Like it's not. And imagine if we would have tried to replace those songs with other songs, like fans would have like. It's just it's just not the right move.
That makes complete sense. I'm glad you had the help and you were able to sort of work through the relicensing and get the game back up on stores, because obviously it's a cult classic. Everybody knows it nowadays. It's regarded as one of the most I guess important titles that was initially available on Xbox 360 in terms of story and visuals and music, sort of all of that coming together. So will we see Poets of the Fall again in the future? Are they working on any Remedy projects at the moment? I had to ask. I mean, there's no way I can have an interview without getting a teaser for the future.
Thomas, I'm looking at you. No comment. But I mean, like Petri, you said. I mean, Remedy collaborates, they're friends of Sam, but then also we tend to collaborate as a company with people we worked in the past. I mean, there was involvement in Control, obviously, but as for the future, who knows?
That's a very diplomatic answer, but
that's why I'm here for.
So is there anything else you'd like our readers to know about the music of the game, either Mr. Alanko or Mr. Puha? Anything at all? Anything I missed? I know our time is also kind of running short, so I'll sort of open the floor up to you. Anything you'd like to add about, for example, like what your most, I don't know, most interesting moment was, what your best moment was, anything like that.
I'll let Petri obviously take this one, but I'll add that music matters a lot at Remedy, not just music, I'd say audio in general. It's a huge part of the experience, and it's especially for Sam, like music is a huge part of what he likes, and so and that's why you need great collaborators like Petri, who can bring that vision of life, because often you don't immediately know what you need. So and that's the challenge.
And in my point of view, it benefits greatly for, I mean, both parties, both myself and Remedy. It benefits both when you have a longer relationship, because right the very moment when you sit down with somebody and you see him tell you a story, hey, I've got this idea, that, and you see how the eyebrow goes like this, and how micro gestures in your face, and when you exchange ideas, and when you see how the other one reacts to those, it takes time to learn all that, and it takes time to sort of build the trust. I mean, in a relationship, usually it takes time to build any trust, but it's I found it's incredibly worthwhile to me, because during these fantastic voyages that I've taken lately, they sort of teach and teach and teach new things time and time again. So I don't know. I just want to. I don't know if it matters to anyone at all, but I just want to learn new things, keep learning, and rather use Remedy as my teacher than anybody else. Wink a wink.
That makes complete sense. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for being here today. I truly appreciate your time, and I think we got some great answers today. Thank you so much.
I sure hope so.
I think so. I think we learned a lot about the music. I think we learned a lot about why Alan was pulled, a lot about the renegotiation, who helped out, and obviously, how your background makes you, I guess, adverse to doing music renegotiations yourself, music licensing renegotiating yourself. So I think it was great. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.